important, the single most important person who's ever been in my life, and who his very existence really makes it possible for us to be here doing this right now. I mean, there are a lot of folk tales about Rudi. There are a lot of stories, and people tell funny stories, but that is really, just a very small part of Rudi. I mean, Rudi was perhaps the single most important spiritual teacher of the 20th century. He developed this meditation that we practice. And I think, and I've said for many years, this is the greatest gift that was ever passed down from Rudi, the double breathing exercise. Because the double breathing exercise is the very foundation that allows these classes to be possible, that allows, literally, when you develop it in yourself and you build that chakra system, it really extends itself into every single corner of your life. And Rudi was, as I said many times, just this amazing being. I spent a lot of time with him. I used to spend a lot of time in his store. I would go dinner with him, and movies, this, that, the other, parties. And it was an amazing relationship, because the most important aspect of it was something I didn't even realize until later on, that his presence in my life made me realize the amount of work I had to do on myself and how much I had to grow to truly absorb everything that he was teaching me. And, at first it was difficult. I mean, I had a huge ego. I had a huge ego. I had a sense of independence. I had all of this stuff. And I was constantly in my head running away. And then constantly I would ask myself the question, where the hell are you going to go? Who you'll ever meet in your life that will do this for you? Unconditionally, with love, and it didn't make life easy. If you want life to be easy, you shouldn't be doing this meditation. Because this meditation, and one of the most important things he taught me, it makes you look in the mirror at yourself. It makes you truly recognize, what you have to do every day in your life to continue to grow and to continue to develop. And it's not easy to look at oneself every day. It's much easier to look out at the objective world and find billions of things that are wrong with it and complain and think that someday it's going to get fixed. And of course it never gets fixed. The only person that is possible for each and every one of us to fix is ourselves. And when I spent time around Rudi, it was a continuous reminder of this, how much work I had to do, how far I had to go, what I was really up against, what I had to do to develop a system inside that will truly enable me to have a spiritual life. Because basically, that's all I wanted, was a spiritual life. And Rudi made me recognize what was keeping me from having a spiritual life was me. And if I didn't overcome, Stuart, and break Stuart down and use whatever God sent to do this, the spiritual life would have been impossible. This is the essence of Rudi's teaching. And it's one of the things that most people are scared shitless of, dealing with themselves, overcoming themselves. Please try and sit still. Overcoming themselves, breaking themselves down. I mean, I once asked him, I said, well, why do you go to Muktananda? Because he always complained about Muktananda. And the things he told me was so incredibly difficult and strange and almost horrible, I said, why? He said, Stuart, he's the only person I've ever met on this planet who can break me down. And basically he was telling me, Stuart, I am probably the only person on this planet that will break you down. You have to have somebody in your life like that. And if you don't have somebody in your life like that, understand who's willing to say no. You're not perfect. You need to work on yourself. You need to grow. You need to open deeper inside yourself. You need to attain a much higher level of consciousness. And I think Rudi was all about that. Yes, he was fun, really fun to be around. And, we laughed a lot. Everybody laughed around him. He had such, an irreverent or, view of the world, that he could see the absurdity about everything that took place around him. But at the same time, it was more than that. You understand? It was more than that. And if you want a spiritual life, you have to go to where it's more than that. You have to go to that place inside yourself that says, what do I need to do to grow? Rudi needed Muktananda to grow. He went there. And he told me that it was like when he would leave, it was like escaping from a prison. This is what he told me. The first thing he'd do would he'd run to Bombay and he would get a hamburger. First thing he would do. And it was incredible, but I said, why do you go? He said, Stuart, I never met anyone who can break me down. I never met anyone who can force me to go deep enough inside myself to be able to transcend everything that life throws at me, everything that exists in this world. The double breathing exercise is the key to this, because that simple exercise will take you to the kind of depth that, where you stop complaining about life and you start doing something about it. You start building an inner life. You start learning how to surrender and let go. You start learning how to do what is essential to have a spiritual life. And this was what Rudi was about. He was a great, great spiritual master. At the same time, he was so totally human, so completely human in the way he approached everybody, the unconditional love he had for every one of his students, the willingness to pass on this amazing teaching and to let go of everything in his life in order to do it. I mean, to me, I don't meet a lot of people like that. I really don't. And anyway, it was the most extraordinary experience I ever went through. I spent 6 years with him. I was with him the moment the plane crashed and hit a mountain. I mean, my being here is a miracle of Rudi. I was holding his hand when we hit a mountain, and his soul force passed into me and kept me alive. And not only kept me alive, it kept making me do what I had to do every day in order to pass this meditation on to a new generation of people. So Rudi, he teaches these classes. I don't teach these classes. I'm not capable of teaching these classes. I just am capable of surrendering in depth and letting go and getting out of the way and let him come and teach. Let him come and transmit the Shakti and the energy. Please try and sit still. It's really important that people don't move, because if you move, I know everybody's sitting in their own bedroom, apartment, all over the world here, from Australia to Brazil to New York but if you move while this class is going on, you disrupt the entire energy of the class. So please try and sit still. If you have an itch, you have this, just go and get centered in the chakra below it. It'll go away. It'll also make you stronger, that you don't have to become subject to every little annoyance that takes place in life. So this is a special day, the day of birth, the day that Rudi was born. For God's sake, he wasn't born, from a lotus flower in the Himalaya mountains. We're not Padmasambhava. He was Rudi. He was born in East New York in Brooklyn, which at that time was a great slum that he grew out of. And somehow, it's like that title of my book, A Lotus Flower in Muddy Waters. He grew out of muddy waters. He knew how to transform all of the negativity of life into a spiritual life. He passed down to us a technique to do this. Because honestly, most people live in muddy waters. Most people live in a world where, they're dealing with tension and problems and economics and money and this and that and the other and family and the mind stays very active, swimming around in muddy waters. He came out of that. He managed to transform a place like New York City into something sacred. And I'll never forget walking through New York City, and it never looked the same to me as when I used to, before I met Rudi, walk through the city on my own. So each of us has their New York City, each of us has their muddy water, but everyone in this class has this meditation practice, and you can use it to become a lotus flower, to become someone sacred, somebody divine that truly is connected to God, and spending your time and energy in this life to develop a system that can enable you to do this. It's Rudi. It's his energy that is permeating everything that goes on in this class. And although we're all sitting in front of computers and monitors, and people are in really literally all over the world here, it's kind of a miracle that we can practice Rudi's meditation and share this with each other and allow this meditation to help us grow and develop a spiritual life. So yes, we all have problems, we all have tensions, we all have muddy water, but it's no excuse. You understand? Because, the muddy water, it's like Rudi always said, you want a pearl, you need an irritation in an oyster. The muddy water is the irritation. The double breathing exercise, this very sacred gift that he gave to all of us, is the means of turning that irritation, that muddy water, into something sacred. So let's do this class with a great deal of gratitude and a great sense of surrender, to this incredible master who came to the earth to pass this down to us. So we'll have a meditation class, and then afterwards, if anyone has a question, I'll be happy to try and answer it.
Stuart,
Yes.
is there anything else that you may not have said already that you'd like to tell us about Rudi?
I could go on for days, literally. There's so much to talk about, but I'm trying to get to the essence of it, to the absolute core of what he taught me and what I learned from him. And, look, I was 25 years old when I met him. I was a very young person. I had just gotten back from Europe. I was in Morocco, Spain, pretty drugged out and living that way when I was a young person. And, the meeting was, when I used to think about it, it was kind of miraculous. And then I asked him, I said, Rudi, what happened that day? He said, Stuart, I looked out the window of my gallery and I saw my son looking in the window, lost in the universe. And I just pulled you in the door. And from that point on, it became this unconditional love. just being around him and allowing myself to absorb the things he was teaching me. I had spent 9 years looking for somebody who could teach me how to do spiritual practice and live in the world and live a life. I wasn't meant to live in ashrams and to live in monasteries and things like that. To be a monk. I was born on the streets of the Bronx, for God's sake, in tenements and slums, and raised there, and it's what I knew. And, of course, my whole life when I was a kid, I always dreamed of getting out of the Bronx. That was my main goal, was to get out of the Bronx. But, I needed spiritual practice that had street smarts. Rudi presented that to me. What he taught me had street smarts. What he taught me was a whole new language that emanated from the fact that he was born in Brooklyn, I was born in the Bronx, and it really emanated from that, taking the life we were living in the Western world, using principles that are literally, maybe God knows 500,000 years old. This whole Kundalini energy is a very ancient form of spiritual practice, and using it to transform the world we were living in into a spiritual life. And when I began to see how he lived, and when I began to see what he was trying to teach me, it became a really remarkable thing and a miraculous thing for me. He was teaching me that everything in life was sacred, everything. No matter how terrible it is there to teach us something about ourselves and what we need to do to grow and to develop a connection with God. And Rudi was, I don't know, we used to go to Chinese restaurant. We found one Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, and I'll never forget it. We went there till we had every dish on the menu. He was friends with the cook and the waiters and the owner and it was extraordinary. His love of life, his wanting to eat from, as he always said, from every dish of life's smorgasbord. Everything to him was sacred. And at the same time, there was no naivety about it, because he recognized all the bullshit in the world. And I remember once a bunch of people were standing in his store talking about politics, and he walked up and he just said, who's president of this country? I'll never forget that. Who's president? I mean, it was all bullshit to him. It was all like, stuff that just comes and goes and comes and goes. Our job is to turn it into spirit, into something that is permanent, which is the soul connecting with higher energy in the universe. Everything else is, it's like that quote I always use from Shakespeare, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace, from day to day. And it, out, brief candle. Life is but a passing shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour on the stage, then is heard no more. Ultimately, Shakespeare, it's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Rudi recognized this. All the drama, the soap opera, the nonsense of the world, it was just fleeting moments. It all changes. It all comes and it goes. What stays and what's permanent is one's connection with higher energy in the universe. And our job is to get strong enough inside not to get swept away in the Maya, not to allow the Maya to control our lives, but to be strong enough to connect with spirit and to become one with higher energy in the universe. And that is what he taught. He gave an exercise that makes it possible for human beings to do this. And many people just take it for granted. They come to class, they don't come to class. I'll come in 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. You just take it for granted. And time passes. Time passes. And instead of using that time in a conscious way to consciously build your inner life and get connected to God, this is what Rudi taught me, how precious time is, how precious life is, and how essential it is to use it in every way possible, so that one can get closer to God. Recognizing even the sacred nature of Maya, of illusion, because that in itself is also a teacher. It is teaching us what we have to do with our lives. And he used to crack me up. I remember, Muktananda was in New York, and suddenly the whole ashram changed. He made Rudi surrendered his whole ashram. We no longer were doing this double breathing exercise because Muktananda didn't like it. Everybody had to become a vegetarian because that's what Muktananda. And the whole, Rudi became, I'll never forget, I was working in the basement of this, this photographer who was rented a space from Rudi, and I was renovating it for him. And he came down and he said, okay, Muktananda wants me to be a celibate, I'll be a celibate. I'll surrender my sex life as long as I get in return the Shakti that is helping me to get closer to God. He even offered Muktananda his business. He had a multi-million-dollar business. He said, Baba, you want this business? It's yours. All I want is my connection to God. It was extraordinary, Muktananda didn't like us doing the double breathing exercise because nobody in India, in the Hindu faith, would do this double breathing exercise. We stopped doing it. It went on for about 3 months, 4 months. We didn't do it. Then one day Rudi said, it's enough. We have to do the double breathing. And boy, everybody in the whole meditation group just breathed a sigh of relief that we went back to this. Learning how to surrender, learning how to, let go with the purpose, the sole purpose of connecting with higher energy, connecting with God. This is the key to all of this. And unless we learn how to do this, it's just as lifetime after lifetime of all this bullshit that we have to go through on the earth. So I learned this from Rudi because and not from having read his book or I read his books and all that, but from being with him, seeing how he lived, seeing the way he ran his life, seeing how, he transformed everything in his daily life into some kind of miraculous teaching that was helping him to grow. And yet there was fun, there was laughter, there was parties, it was really, it had all kinds of movie stars that used to come there to study with him. And all these people, the woman from Hitchcock's Birds, she used to be there, and a bunch of them. Yeah. Guy that wrote Bonnie and Clyde used to come all the time. And, there were a lot of people like that came and studied with him. And it was a fun, it was not only just an ashram and not a serious spirit, but there was joy in it. There was love in it. There was fun in it. And that's the way it has to be. Which means that every person that does this inner work has to learn how to get over the negativity in themselves. Break it down. Turn it into a spiritual life. The double breathing exercise teaches one, makes it possible to do that. This exercise that Rudi developed I mean, look, I've been all over India. I've been with swamis and rishis, and I never heard of anyone teaching that exercise. And yet I would sit with all these holy people doing this exercise, you know, and every single one of them realized this person has training. And they just huge quantities of Shakti would come in my direction. It's like that story I always tell about Kala Rinpoche. I was sitting there doing Rudi's meditation practice. I got, in 3 days, I got a lifetime of Tibetan Buddhist training, sitting there doing Rudi's double breathing exercise. Saved me having to learn Tibetan and paint tankas and go to 5-year retreats in 3 days. This extraordinary being who everybody thought was dying. Only one, he told me, I have nobody to teach. He said, when I was a young tulku in Tibet, he said, I would go to see my Rinpoche. I'd have to wait hours because so many people were lined up with spiritual questions. He said, I have nobody to teach today. And there were 300 lamas sitting in the courtyard in this monastery. I mean, this came out of Kala Rinpoche's mouth. It just, I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. This great saint, this incredible being, virtually was dying because he had nobody to teach. And it's like Rudi's aphorism, you know? I mean, you know, a teacher's like a cow. You got to milk the cow or it's going to scream into the night. And he always used to say, if you look up a cow's ass, you're going to see shit. If you want the milk, you got to go and, you know, milk the cow, pull the tits, you know, get the milk. And this great Tibetan saint was lying in bed there with a blanket up to his neck, only because nobody was willing to go there and pull the tits and milk him so he could teach, do what his purpose was in life. That was Rudi. And everything was so practical. It wasn't all esoteric nonsense, you know, new age esoteric nonsense. It was all practical. It was all, how do we use this in the world? And the one thing I loved about Rudi, being around him, I've said this 20 times already, I'll say it again, it forced me to look at myself in the mirror. And it forced me to recognize, you know, at one point in my life, I was living in the University of Schmuckdom and I saw it in the mirror. And his presence was a constant reminder that I hadn't arrived yet. And at first, this was intimidating. And secondly, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. You know, I don't want to promote but I wrote a book called Rudi. I mean, there's a book that came out a while back called The Mystical Ferry Boat and Other Stories. And in that book, there's a story called Rudi. And it's the story of the last half hour of Rudi's life. You know, that airplane crash we were in together. But it's more than that. The story is about what it means to have a spiritual teacher, what it is required of one to truly study with a spiritual master. I mean, that's really what the book is about. But, you know, I mean, I'd recommend it, you know, if you all want to find out about Rudi. I mean, it's really a very in-depth study of Rudi and my relationship with him. And the whole story is about 90 pages. But it's, you know, again, I don't ever really promote my books, but that's something It's a book I really like. I mean, it's probably the best thing I ever wrote. And if you haven't read that, I would suggest reading it. It'll give you a very deep insight into what it means to have a spiritual teacher, to have a so-called guru. I don't consider myself a guru. What it means to have a teacher. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
Stuart, can you talk about what the significance or why the double breath is so effective, or what's like the significance of it? Because you talk about it a lot and we do it. So just a little more expounded awareness about it.
It's very simple, Wendy. I mean, look, it starts out with bringing your attention to the chakra below the navel. So the mind literally becomes a surgical instrument that opens the very core of your being. Now, without that core of your being opening, none of the other chakras are going to really open. So the first step is bringing the attention here. And the mind going into the hara will act like a surgical instrument that opens the hara. It almost like it opens like a great lotus flower inside somebody. The next step is opening the heart, feeling gratitude. Understand, God is love. God is joy. God is, happiness, which is not something very common in this crazy world we live in. So the next step is opening the heart, being centered below the navel, and opening that chakra gives you the strength to keep the heart center open. Then there's the breath. Breath is life. Every time you inhale, you take in life. Every time you exhale, you let go of a part of yourself. It's I am that. I am, and surrender to everything. So you breathe into the heart center. The heart center expands because of the prana, the breath, the power of breath. Understand? And then you exhale, and you take another deep breath. You swallow to relax the throat chakra. Take another deep breath into the chakra below the navel. And that expands that chakra even further. So what you're doing in this double breathing exercise is you're opening the whole chakra system. It's not just like people tell you to meditate on the third eye, meditate on the heart center. You need to have the whole chakra system working. It's like an orchestra without violins. If the whole chakra system is not working. And the double breathing exercise gets the entire chakra system working. And then it allows you to draw energy through the sexual area. And that energy will activate Kundalini. And Kundalini is the pathway to enlightenment. So the double breathing exercise is about developing the entire chakra system. I mean, people talk about, meditate on the third eye. You're just going to space yourself out. Meditate on the heart chakra. All right, but what good is that unless you have that grounding inside to keep the heart chakra open? So Rudi's meditation practice was a holistic practice. It is the development of the entire chakra system. And that's the key to gaining a state of spiritual enlightenment. Otherwise, as I say, it's like having an orchestra and you don't have any violins because one isn't grounded below the navel. There's no, horns, whatever people play in orchestras. It's like a total orchestra, a holistic development of the chakra system. and the wisdom to develop something like this. You know, it's extraordinary. It's probably one of the most important developments of the 20th century, the development of this double breathing exercise.
Very basic question. Double breathing, breathe in, then hold breath and breathe in one more time, then
Yes.
breathing out. I did the opposite. In and 2 times, something like this. So
You breathe into the heart, Otsuko, you hold it 10 seconds,
okay.
then you exhale, then you breathe below the navel. That's the double breathing exercise.
Could you tell me one more time?
Yeah, okay.
It's 9 o'clock.
You breathe, the first breath is into the heart center.
Mm-hmm.
And while you hold the breath in the heart center, you swallow to relax the throat chakra.
Mm.
After about 10 seconds, you exhale a little bit of the air, and then you stop, and then you continue to exhale until you're comfortable. Then you immediately take another deep breath, and you bring it into the hara, into the chakra below the navel. And by doing that, you expand that chakra and develop that chakra. And then you hold the breath for approximately 10 seconds. And then you exhale a little bit of the air, you stop, wait a few seconds, continue to exhale until you're comfortable.
Yeah, I've been doing like that.
Then you just
I
breathe
was
naturally.
confused, confusing,
No,
but
then you just breathe naturally. But you only do that breathing when you have to do it. You don't do it throughout the entire meditation. So if you're really centered and open, this energy will come and it'll do a great job of really developing you inside. But if you're thinking and daydreaming and going off, then you recenter yourself and you do the double breathing exercise. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
Stuart, can you talk about the time between Rudi's birthday and his samadhi, please?
The time between, yeah. Well, look, I've said it for years, it's always the most difficult period of the year for me. Between his birthday, the 24th of January, and the samadhi, the 21st of February. And I don't know why, but it's always very powerful. It's a powerful period. It's the dead of winter. It's that period between his birth and death. And it's always been really powerful. Why? I don't know. But I know that it's a time that I have to get very quiet inside, very surrendered inside, go very deep in myself in every meditation class and even during the day. Because, otherwise, it's just too much. It's too much. And I have to really absorb that energy. I don't know if it's that way for all of you, but it certainly has been that way for me since the day Rudi left the world. Do I understand it? Frankly, I don't understand any of this. I really don't. I really don't. It just works. That's the only thing I understand. I do it and it works. And it's taken me so far in my life that I can only have one thing for it, just depth of gratitude. Depth of gratitude. And also, Mercury is in retrograde now, and all this stuff is compounding, And it's best just to stay very quiet and very simple and take care of everything in a simple way and just let the energy work on you, Let it really build you inside and help you to grow. Does anyone else have a question? Okay. So, There'll be meditation on Wednesday at the same time. And as I always end the class, you know, I have just deep gratitude for every single person that attends these classes. And I can't tell you, you know, how it affects me inside to know that the presence of everyone here is helping me to grow and get closer to God. And it just means so much to me. And I'm so deeply grateful for all of you that have made this kind of commitment. And so bless you all. Thank you. And in all humility, I couldn't ask for a better way to spend an hour and a half on a Monday evening, frankly. I think it's totally extraordinary. So God bless you all. I mean, we're all children of God, you know, in many ways, children of Rudi's meditation practice. So let's never take it for granted. Let's use it, you know, in every class and during the day to really develop our own unique connection with God. It's not going to be what Rudi's connection was. It's not going to be what my connection is. Each of us has a unique connection. And the double breathing exercise is just a craft to find that unique connection. It's not a religion. It's not a cult. There's nothing of that nature. It's just simply a craft. And if one does it, they find their own unique connection, their own unique life. So bless you all and thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody on Wednesday. God bless you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart.
You're welcome. Night.
Night.